You are all leaders in the philanthropic sector in our city and in the region. But what, when you think back, what motivated you or what motivates you to give so much of your focus to philanthropy, to helping others? What was it originally? Do you want to start us off?
Sure. I'm from Pilsen, so as my friend Carlos Tortolero has said, you can take the girl out of Pilsen, but you can't take the Pilsen out of the girl. So when I look back at my roots, that's very important to me. And I think about my parents, and I come from a family of 7, and they sacrificed for us. 5 of us went to Catholic elementary school, and 3 of us to Catholic high school. So that is really the emphasis of where a lot of my interest in philanthropy, I guess, started. It started at home, and just seeing the care that they had for us. But professionally, I think I got into the job accidentally. But I was curious, and I think that's what I encourage everyone to be curious about your work and the opportunities that may be before you. And so that's where I had the opportunity then. Back then, I'm really dating myself. I started with Continental Bank and worked for many years as a program officer, and then headed up the foundation. So that's really my roots. So I would say be curious about your surroundings and people you meet and issues, and somehow it all came together for me in that way.
Love Pilsen. Kim, how about you?
A little similar. I think it's in my DNA. I grew up in that time where your grandmother, and I had a grandmother and a great-grandmother. I was fortunate enough to know both on my dad's side. And I grew up in that era where they were the family that would always, supply the dinners if someone didn't have anything to eat, or we would sell popcorn balls and give them to people that, didn't have anything like that. So it was part of my DNA. We were always the open house kind of house, and that continued in my adulthood as well. We were the ones that everybody would come to, and for a meal or to have fun or just to play, it was always that house. And then for me, I think it really turned. I have always been in the investment industry, and one of my clients suggested that I join a nonprofit board. And at that time, you don't, at least for me, I didn't think about it early in my career at a young age, like right out of college, because you're busy trying to accumulate wealth and get a house and take care of children and things like that. But at a point for me when I realized I'm okay, my kids are okay, when I knew the last one was at least going to college, and what they did after that was up to them, I started saying, this is the time for me. It's time now to give back. It's a greater good theory, and I believe in the greater good. So that's when I got seriously involved, because there was nothing else. I had decided that I'm okay, my family's okay, and the kids are okay. So now it's time to take a breath and see how I can help somebody else.
That's great.
So it's interesting to me how times have changed. 25 years ago, I was in banking, and I shared an office with a gentleman by the name of David. And the Wall Street Journal would come, and we each would take a section. And he would always take section C, which is the money investing section, and I would always take the personal interest section, section A. I didn't care about the C part. He didn't care about the A part. And I would look over at David, who sat right next to me, and I would think to myself, this guy's the banker. I'm not the banker. I mean, David had the briefcase, he had the suit, he had the hair. I hated him. And he's, what's going on with the markets? And I got to read The Economist, and I got to read the section C of the Wall Street Journal. And I was going through a period of my life in my late 20s where I was quite frankly, I was really thinking about my faith and how I could move my faith into action. And I saw myself juxtaposed again with David. I'm thinking, somebody doesn't belong in this seat, and David's exactly where he needs to be. And it was at that point where I did a lot of soul searching to say, okay, how do I move my faith into action? How do I build a career for myself, which is focusing more on mission? And David was very much focusing on profit. And I want to be very clear, we need the Davids of the world. And he was exactly where he needed to be. But I needed to be focusing on mission. And so it was at that point that I made the decision to move into, I hate the title, but the nonprofit sector. And I've been doing that now for 23 years, and it's been really one of the greatest gifts of my life.
So just stay with that theme for a second, Eric. talking about making that transition, and in spite of David, and hopefully you've gotten him involved with CARE and other organizations.
In spite of David, poor David right now. David's a very successful, I don't feel badly for David, let me tell you. David's doing real well for himself.
I'm giving David a call when I get out of here.
Exactly.
Come on over. We need your help. But the, certainly that was a certain part of the inspiration for making that leap. You think about inspiration and philanthropy. Are there someone that inspired you in this work, either before you got into it, when you're young, or once you got into it? I know that certainly at CARE, you've talked a lot about a friend of yours.
So a bit of advice to all of you: if I get hit by a beer truck tomorrow, apply for my job. It is an awesome job. Truly, we are right there at the center of philanthropy and nonprofits and corporations that are looking to make a difference in the world. And they want to talk to us because of our network, because of our resources. And they come to us and they share their ideas and they share their work and they share their passion. And so the person in this seat, as working at Forefront, we have this incredible opportunity to be inspired on a daily basis with these extraordinary people. And so that, to me, when you're looking for the work that you want to do in the world, how do you connect to those networks of people who are up to something? People who are about making big change in the world, people who want to be the world, the change that they want to see in the world, to use the expression from Mahatma Gandhi. How do you connect yourself to those networks? Forefront is one way, and again, fortunately for me, I get the chance to do it every day, and I'm paid to do it, which is even better. But I think, we were talking at our table, one of the people that I want to lift up today, and she was already mentioned, is Marka Bristow. We had the real honor, Marka Bristow, really. The work that they do at Access Living really is just wonderful. And Marka was on our board. And I learned so much from Marka from the time that she was on our board. And here's a woman who had an accident in her 20s as she was getting into the prime of her life. And she turned her loss and her tragedy into a mission. And as a result, she affected the lives of literally countless people. And she was an architect for the Americans with Disabilities Act. She just was a champion and an advocate for inclusivity in all of its forms, particularly people with disabilities. And I think one of the things that we don't talk about in this work is, yes, be passionate about something, but do you have the perseverance to see it through? I mean, think of a Marka who dedicated her life over decades to this work and the impact that she had. But each one of us in this room, through our work and through those issues that we care about, if we can be dedicated over a long period of time, the impact that we can have, we can't even imagine right now. So it's those types of people who've been tremendous inspirations for me because of their perseverance, because of their passion and their dedication.
That's right. Kim, first of all, if those, you talked about philanthropy, learning it at home, and the meals, and inviting people in. If that's still available at your household, I got two little boys who are going to send over, one to get a meal and spend time with you.
I cook a little less now than I used to.
It's to spend time with you and learn. But you talked about seeing that in your youth, and then you talked about a client suggesting joining a nonprofit board. Where do you see true inspiration in philanthropy in Chicago today, or is there someone that kind of inspires you continually now in this effort?
I think in Chicago, I see it all over. I am very excited to live in Chicago because I see that inspiration in this room. I know some of the people in the room, and I feel it all over Chicago. I'm constantly, even in Chicago and outside of Chicago, talking about the civic leadership that we experience in Chicago, the philanthropy that we experience in Chicago. So I'm inspired by the businesses and the people. There can always be more, absolutely, and I think everyone should do something and it would be a greater place. But I'm inspired by most of the businesses in Chicago and the people in Chicago because I think we have something very unique in terms of our philanthropy, our civic responsibility, and our giving in Chicago. I've been involved with a lot of organizations, and it's so many of them. Sometimes I feel like my calling is to accumulate them so that they can have bigger impact, instead of having 1,800 educational funds, maybe we should have 800 so that they can have more impact. And I'll probably hit on that a little bit more in the conversation with my work at the Field Foundation and what the Field Foundation is doing. So all of Chicago really does inspire me. That's not a cliche. And now I'm really inspired by the millennials, by the youth, because they are walking the walk and talking the talk in the big way. I mean, some of us boomers, including me, depending on who you're talking to, are rolling our eyes, going, just going, whatever, But they're walking the walk and talking the talk, and they're not backing down from it. I think it's ingrained in them. What was important to the boomers is no longer important to the millenniums. They're living it's about the greater good with climate change and impact investing and diversity and inclusion. And I'm also inspired by some of the corporate leaders that are more visible, obviously the Chase and the BlackRocks with Larry Fink and Jamie Dimon, what they're doing, because I think it is gaining momentum. And I feel like the force is at the top, because you got to have it at the top for it to work. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. The force is at the top, meeting the millenniums in the middle. I feel like we have something going, so I'm very inspired and very hopeful.
That's great. No, I have had the benefit of I met Julie when I first moved to Chicago almost 20 years ago. I moved to Pilsen to work at Cristo Rey with Tony, who's now the president. I think he's here today, Tony Ortiz. There he is. And we got to know Julie awfully well in that work. And we also saw you around Pilsen, and a lot of good, well, there's Cristo Rey, the Resurrection Project, the museum, so many different things. There's a passion there, obviously. Right. And how did that manifest itself, but also where do you see inspiration for how that's carrying in the next generation?
It's a variety of things. So when I grew up right across the street from the museum, the National Museum of Mexican Art. So at that time, of course, it didn't exist. So many years later, when I became part of my career in philanthropy, I got to know Carlos Tortolero, the founder, and so it was a natural for me. So I didn't realize that all those years earlier, as I was playing in the park and my family was playing in the park and using the park, that one day I would have such a great impact. And so, think about where you lived, where you come from. So it's in your backyard. So for me, it was, it happened naturally like that way. And I think about, one special moment when the museum had a capital campaign in 2001, and we were celebrating the event, and there it was on the way home, and I looked back and I saw the museum, the new wing had been added, and it gave me such great pride. It looked like the place was hovering, at night. Wow. It was not the tequila, okay? But when I look back, I was like enormous pride just sprung out of me. So it's those moments, I think, that, of course, there's been challenges with everything, but it's those moments. More recently, though, about 10 years ago, when Bank of America inherited the LaSalle Marathon, now called the Bank of America Chicago Marathon, I'm inspired by that. It doesn't inspire me to run, but I have the honor of experiencing the start stage. So there you are, all the runners getting ready to do their thing. And it's like every shape, size, color of person that you see running. And many of those individuals, 40,000 or so runners, 10,000 of them run for a charity. And so last year we raised $22 million. So it's the largest single event. Yeah. So you take that $22 million, it emanates from the official charities that we have. It's individuals that have a passion for running that then they in turn raise money, and that all equals to $22 million. It happened in 2018, and we expected it keeps growing every year. So events like that inspire me. So when I see folks been able to be at the finish line, and when you're putting the medal on the recipient, coming through, it's those that have been running for 5 or 6 hours or so. Those are the true heroes. They're very passionate and emotional about that time. So I would say that in everything that you do, you'll find that inspiration, that passion. So that's how I did it.
You didn't know this, but there's a prerequisite. If you're at this lunch today, you have to run the marathon. So start working out. You can start at the Hale 1K turkey trot, but you might have to do a little more than that to get ready.
Trot.
Trot. So just to shift for a minute, a little bit to the intersection of career and philanthropy, and I guess understand a little bit where that's worked well for you and maybe where it's been a challenge. And, Kim, just talking to you over last few weeks, certainly, but over the last couple of years, you've spoken about this a little bit, and just that, that it's a challenge and so much needs. How do you start to focus your effort? There's a challenge and opportunity in that. Maybe you could share a little bit about.
Sure. Obviously, in my career, I've had a couple of challenges and opportunity trying to meld philanthropy in the workplace, because it's taken a while, but for a long time, and there's still quite a few people out there that don't believe you can do well and do good at the same time. So you start with that premise. And one of my stints throughout my career was with the Illinois State Board of Investment, where I was a co-manager of their pension funds. They were about 75% funded then, so it wasn't me. I take no credit for where they are now, but at the time, the former President Barack Obama was a state senator, and he had heard from numerous citizens that had businesses that there was no access for minority and women-owned businesses to pension fund dollars. So he would call all the pension funds in front of him and give public browbeating this panel did, just to say, why not? So I took a portion, in addition to being portfolio manager, I took responsibility for helping Illinois State Board of Investment create their emerging and minority women program that gave them access to pension fund dollars, which a lot of times is where the money is in the financial services as it relates to that. So, but in doing that, you always get the naysayers. I don't know anybody, there's not anybody out there, they don't have best execution. So when I designed the program with the staff at ISB and our consultant at the time, I wanted to make sure that everything that they could say in a negative way, we had already addressed, okay? So we did a study about best execution for minority and women-owned firms. We did a study and put that information in there, and it was no different. You had the normal bell curve that you would with anybody else. We put together a list of people to introduce some of the majority brokers to, so when they said there was nobody, it's like, here's some people you can consider. You do your own due diligence and choose from there. And it became probably the best, or we gave out the largest number of assets to minority and women-owned firms on a percentage of asset basis. ISB was about $12 billion. We would give upwards of 15% of that money to minority and women-owned and disabled firms, whereas CalPERS was very active in the day, but they're $200 billion. They were giving out 2%, So on a percentage of assets, we were like the top-ranking program in there, but it came with a bunch of challenges. And at the end of the day, the managers and brokers that the majority firms and the pension funds eventually hired performed, like I said, just as well, or had the same bell curve that anybody else had. So that would have been one of the challenges. And I had a similar challenge at I chaired the board of ISEC for previous Governor Quinn, at the time where the 529 prepaid tuition program was having some issues. One of my board members is here. Thank you for your service. But it was a trust issue. They weren't sure that they were getting the bang for the dollar. People weren't sure that the money would be there. And it was similar to, it wasn't a full faith and credit guarantee, so therein lied the rub. Are we going to have that money? So we went in and changed the full board and brought in some new staff and was able to make a difference and bring the trust back to that program as well. And have that program continue with some success even today. So, there are a number of times and challenges that I had throughout my 30-something year career, but those are some that come to mind specifically as it relates to philanthropy in the workplace and doing well and doing good at the same time.
You certainly did that and had fun. The amount of good that has come from that and inspiring philanthropy in communities, it's tremendous. But talking like that, your careers, they're going to be calling you back into duty here very quickly. We need you. Eric, you talked about your career change and going to care, but also at Forefront, having the best job, because you really do. You see that intersection all over. some experiences in that you might share?
So when I would go to a cocktail party, when I was working at CARA, and people would say, what do you do? I say, I work for CARA, and they'd say, what is CARA? And I'd say, well, we're an organization. We help individuals who are homeless, people who are struggling in poverty. We help them to get jobs and keep jobs. And people who would hear that, they'd, oh, wow, that's cool. Oh, tell me more. Or I would always get the, oh, you're such a good person. My friends would be like, no, he ain't a good person, let me tell you. Right? But there was this level of engagement when I would say that. They'd be like, oh, wow, how cool. Now when I go to a cocktail party and I say I work at Forefront, they say, what's Forefront? I say, well, we're the State Association for Nonprofits and Foundations. And we do education and we provide advocacy and we also mobilize our members to work together on issues that are important to them and issues that are important to the sector. They're like, I think I'm going to go get another drink, right? And I want to scream because I want to say, no. That's such the coolest work in the world, right? Especially that last part. Mobilizing our members to work together, to work collectively on issues that are important to them and important to the sector. Because I want to follow up on something that Kim said earlier, this notion of this collective work. And I'm convinced through my experience in this field that if we do not get organizations, public, private, philanthropy, nonprofits, to work collectively on issues that we all care about, we're going to continue to be operating at the fringes. We are going to continue to operating in the margins. If we're going to move the needle, then we have to work collectively. And it requires organizations like Forefront that quite frankly isn't doing the sexy work, but we're doing the heavy lifting. We're the backbone organization in which all that collective action rests. So I'll give you two quick examples. Number one, we built Forefront with a lot of people in this room. We helped to build the largest public-private coalition in the country focusing on Census 2020. We have 26 funders. We have over 100 nonprofits. We have cities, counties. We have the state all working together under the Forefront umbrella, focusing on making sure people, particularly in undercounted communities, making sure they're counted for Census 2020. Billions of dollars is at stake, representation in Congress is at stake, but if we were all operating in our own individual silos, we wouldn't have the power or the impact that we have. The second thing, and by the way, I'm going to use this the next time I go to a cocktail party because this is sexy. We are an anchor tenant, along with our friends at the Field Foundation, at the Impact House. And people are like, ooh, tell me more. This is cool, folks, because it's going to be the largest co-working space for philanthropy in the country. So no, nonprofits are notorious for working in silos. Let me tell you, philanthropy is even more notorious for working in their own individual silos. And this is going to be a space, and it was created by a gentleman by the name of Israel Adonijah, who I'm sure many of you know from Fabric Impact House. And he's bringing us together. There's 9 foundations in there right now, and plus a Forefront. And it's going to be this really cool space where people come. Foundations are going to be located there, but nonprofit programming is going to be done there through Forefront. And there could ultimately be 15 to 20 foundations under one roof. Imagine the collective action that could occur, the partnerships, the conversation. How is that going to be leveraged so that we truly can work together and move the needle on some of these issues? So stay tuned. We're moving in the spring, but that's going to really be a transformative moment, I believe, for Chicago, and I think it's going to have an impact on philanthropy nationwide. So really, really exciting.
Yeah, I'll make a quick comment on that as it relates to the Field Foundation going into that space. You know, imagine the possibilities when you're sharing ideas in philanthropy and civic engagement and civic involvement. I just think it's huge. Just like Eric does, it's going to be huge and have a real big impact. And one of the things we've been trying to do at the Field Foundation and being in this combined space is just a part of it, is we're a small organization compared to the Joyce and the MacArthur and Chicago Community Trust. So when we hired our current CEO, Angelique Power, some of the conversation was around pipeline. Okay, we can start, we're doing due diligence, we're doing different things at the Field Foundation, we're looking at different missions. We're focusing in certain areas, the South and the West Side and so forth. So as we give to these smaller organizations, because we have limited funds, maybe we can share ideas with the Joyce or the MacArthur or the next level so that they can continue their stream of income and then get more. So kind of like build a pipeline, and as it moves through the pipeline, it grows and grows and grows so that these organizations can have bigger impact. And I see that taking place with this shared workspace as well as many other very positive things.
That is, I've heard a bit about it, and it is
Yep.
unbelievably exciting.
It's
However, at Big Shows Fund, there's been a lot of talk about shared office space, with me going to some office alone and them being in another office. I don't know what that message is. I gotta talk to someone about that issue, though. But just that idea of sharing ideas and sharing space, kind of, in the backdrop of this Edelman study and what employees are saying about their desire and increasing expectations, really, of employers to be change leaders. I'd like to hear from the three of you just about strategies that you're seeing work well. And maybe, Julie, just, one, philanthropy cuts across
Sure.
many different experiences and desires, and then you put that in the workplace. And one is, senior leadership, understanding all those, and then building. And you at Bank of America have done unbelievable work of cutting across the organization. And one of the things I've heard about from you and others in the organization is, I think it's courageous discussions.
Courageous conversations.
Conversations.
Yes. Yeah, and it's not, we didn't invent it, but a few years ago with some of the issues that were impacting our communities, especially with Bank of America, really being a coast to coast in the U.S. and every state almost, we saw issues very close. Our employees were affected by it. So courageous conversations are a way to bring dialogue around the table. It could be, two people. It could be a group of people. It could be a formal panel that you get together, but it's a way to raise awareness and education and collectively discuss how we're so different but yet the same. So some of the issues we have discussed. Vietnam War, when Ken Burns had his 10-part documentary, and Bank of America was supporting it nationally on PBS. So it was an opportunity for us to bring about, discussions locally about the Vietnam War. And we learned that there was one employee, for example, she told her story, how she spoke to her uncle. She knew he served, but yet, he never talked about it, but this is a way to open up that dialogue, that conversation. So we have conversations on domestic violence, on drug addiction, on wellness, mental wellness, PTSD, et cetera. So through these courageous conversations, the company has supported, this notion. So whether it's individual employees that want to come together at a local level, or sometimes they're sent through a webinar. We might have an expert panel that's put together. So courageous conversations are a way, again, responding to our employees really told us how some of these issues are impacting them, and a way to bring it and talk about it in the workplace. The other thing is our employee giving. We responded to our employees. They were telling us, we want to give when we want to give to who we want to give. So rather than having a very set campaign time like we did before, we said, okay, employees, you can give any time. Recurring payroll, one-time gift, whatever, any 501c3. So we made that very flexible for them and enabled them to build, to give. So when you look at that number of 8 million or so that our employees have given over the last 5 years, it's only rising every year. Because again, we have empowered our employees to tell us. There have also been some heavy public policy issues, and I've not seen, companies now feel compelled again, because we wanted to respond to our employees. When there was the shooting in Parkland, Florida, in the school, we responded and we said as a bank, we would not lend to gun manufacturers of assault weapons. So. That was back in April. Last year, and it's been a hard conversation, of course, with our clients, but again, we heard that from employees, and so we responded in that way. So I'm seeing more and more kind of general, broader public policy decisions and stances that companies are taking.
Eric and Kim, do you guys have any thoughts on that as well, or examples?
I would just echo what she's saying about the courageous conversations, and to also, when you think about diversity and inclusion, it's a cliche now to talk about that, but focus on the inclusion part. The diversity part is kind of a given. You can count the numbers and do the numbers, but think about how that person feels, what they might be going through. And as you design programs in corporate America, focus on the inclusion part and not just the diversity part, because I think that's going to make a big difference, and it makes a difference to the person that you're trying to bring along. So that's the only thing I would add to some of your comments.
Eric, how about you, seeing work with all these companies?
Just really quickly, you know, it's funny, when I made that switch from banking to the nonprofit sector, it was, you know, you either want for-profit or nonprofit. And certainly the millennials now are saying, no, I will have both, thank you very much. I will have profit and I will have purpose. And the company that I come to and work at, they had better understand the importance of having an impact not only on the bottom line, but also on the environment, on the community, on the employees, and the triple bottom line, if you will. And that is not an aberration, that is the norm now. And so you're seeing this movement of the B Corp community throughout this country, and the 1,200, 1,500 companies throughout the country that are focusing not just on maximizing profit, but also having within their bylaws that they must consider social impact as well. That's not a trend that's going away. And so I think companies now have to do more of these courageous conversations and look at how they're investing their monies, and look at their vendor list, and look at the inclusion that they have not only at the board level, but in executive leadership. It's a very exciting time, and I think there's great opportunities for all of us, regardless of the industry that we're in, to really make a difference.
Okay, let's give our panelists, let's give Josh Hale big round of applause. Wonderful program. We have time for a few questions. If anybody has any questions you'd like to address to any of our panelists up here, just hold up your blue card. Alex, I see several questions down here in front and back there. And meanwhile, Josh has a few questions in hand. I want to remind everybody that our programs are podcast over WGN Radio. So if you didn't get everything down on your little notepads that you heard today, you go to WGN Radio. And we have a few more questions here. There you go.
What is it, rapid fire here? All right, so the first question I have is from Patty Bidwell and the Bidwell Foundation. And she says, I don't see the support or awareness of the many philanthropic efforts that you and others represent by our politicians. In fact, they sometimes undermine those efforts by ignoring them. What can be done to change that?
Well, we have to have an involved electorate, sorry. Is our employees are giving and active and telling us as a company what we should be doing? We should be encouraging them, of course, to vote. So that's how we do it at the ballot box. And so I think civic engagement should be encouraged.
Anybody else?
I mean, I see Sean Healy here from the McCormick Foundation and the great work that they do around civic engagement, so critically important. I think this past 5, 6, whatever time period, number of years, if it's shown us anything, it's the importance for all of us to be voting, to Julie's point, and also to be counted for Census 2020. A lot is on the line, so that definitely is something that each of us can do.
I would echo get everybody registered to vote because that's the way you're going to change things. And also, there's nonprofit organizations, but there are a lot of agencies and government officials that could use the help of the people in the room as well. So it's a blood sport in Chicago, I'll just say that. But it's necessary. So also consider some of the governmental agencies to help work with and to help these politicians do the right thing.
So I saw Jose Rodriguez here from the Dana Murphy Scholarship Fund, and he asked a question. Based on your unique experiences, what are the most exciting and or promising innovations in philanthropy in Chicago?
I think we talked about one, the Impact House.
That's right.
That is so cool.
That is really cool.
I know Izzy Donajay and his passion for, it started many years ago with working with youth. So I think that is exciting.
I would agree. I would also add one more, and I think that, philanthropy has historically here in Chicago done a wonderful job of investing in direct service organizations, obviously critically important. But I think there's more conversations being conducted now about the systems and the policies that have resulted in a lot of the inequities that we have in our society right now. That's something that foundations have never wanted to really talk about or be a part of. I think there's more conversations about, particularly around the area of, the racial inequality inequality and racial inequities that certainly are very pervasive, not only in our state, in our city, but around the country. So I think I'm going to be curious to see how that conversation continues.
And I would just add, you hear more and more about impact investing too, like the YWCA Dory McWhorter has started an impact investing fund. I know our foundation, or one of the foundations that I'm associated with, we're tying our general mission to our financial mission as well. So you're seeing more direct impact investing and focus on that. I think that's has a little momentum now as well.
A question here from Amber Smock from Access Living. Is Amber here? Ready. Imagine that it's November 25th, 2020. How will you be prepared to address philanthropic issues in the coming year? How do you think about what you're going to do and strategies?
Well, the numbers tell us, according to Giving USA, is that about 68%, 70% of giving comes from individuals. That's not going to, that trend hasn't changed much. And when we look at foundations, it's about 18%, bequests 9%, and then corporations 5%. Again, we haven't changed much in those numbers. So I would say individuals, we have to engage individuals more and more. And we are doing it. Certainly, I see corporations doing not only at Bank of America, but other companies, encouraging matching gifts, encouraging civic involvement, volunteerism, board engagement. I can't tell you now how many employees come to me and other colleagues and say, I want to get on the board. How can I get more involved? And so I think that is one way. I think we still have to work with individuals because they're really the lifeblood of our philanthropic community.
Any thoughts on that?
Very similar to what Julie was saying, but I would also, I think now about what I see again, I always go back to the millenniums and how involved they are in everything. Cranes just did a 40 under 40, and there was a guy in there who's started a nonprofit organization where he brings people from the inner city downtown who had never left the neighborhood. And so it's a lot of that going on. My daughter's in the room. I have to give her a shout out because the Art Institute does many things in the community, trying to expose people to the Art Institute of Chicago and some of the other museums that we have here. So it's a lot going on, and I think there will be more of that to talk about this time next year.
I love that hope of the next generation.
And I would just say really quickly, I think that we need to be ready to mobilize our sector to make sure that policies and systems are favorable to our work, to do it in an appropriate way, obviously, but that's the reason why organizations like Forefront exist. I mean, with every new administration and new policies, we need to make sure our voice is heard. We need to make sure that people understand the value of our work, the importance of our work, how we are the backbone of a thriving society and the civil society and a thriving economy. So I think, as we look towards next year and these upcoming elections, we need to be ready for whatever comes so that we make sure that we are advocating for our interests.
Just to keep on that topic, one of the questions is from Sharon Takinis, the Alfred Group, and she asked about the term nonprofit. And as you talk about the sector, what would be an alternative to that? What's a better, maybe?
I always like mission-driven. Mission-driven. I mean, we have to make we won't say profit, God forbid if we say profit, but we need to make a margin. We need to have a surplus. Otherwise, we go away, folks. So it's a horrible term. It's a tax status, and it is, we're the only sector that identifies itself with what it's not. Makes no sense.
At least it's a very exciting name.
No, exactly.
Nonprofit.
Let me tell you what I'm not. Okay.
Running the marathon, and you have to come up with a new name for the sector. No one's leaving here until we get this on. Final question from Dave Catunia at the Communities and School of Chicago. He said, just in terms of the backdrop of our discussion today, how much is philanthropy increasing employee retention and/or improving the culture within your company, your organization, or what you've seen over time?
I don't have those numbers, but I can tell you just by the amount I see of our giving, that with employees, using matching gifts, our employees giving on their own. I'm impressed by that number myself. When I think of my colleagues collectively, giving that and times that over many companies that do that. I'm impressed by that. I would think that the hope has to be, again, in the individual. I see the momentum. Different generations of people are working together now more than ever before. So I think we all have to, understand and learn and respect that. And so we all have each of our potential or something to give, to bring to the table. So understanding that is important.
So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Meeks, but I just want to thank Eric, Kim, and Julie, who have all had a big impact in my life. For your great work.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.